that in the 1970s, Semillon was the most planted cultivar in Bordeaux, of either the reds or the whites. It beat the pants off today's global dominators of Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon. But as of 2017, Semillon was not even in France's top 10. Similarly, in South Africa, in the 1820s or so, Semillon made up 90% of South Africa's national vineyard. But as of today, it makes up roughly 1%, less than 1,000 hectares. Even in Australia, where Semillon made Hunter Valley famous by being harvested really early and then fermented to make these super acidic, eye-watering wines that had to be aged a buttload before anyone could drink them, even there in Hunter Valley, Semillon is on the decline. But we have reason to hope, because Sauterne is still a thing. Arguably, France's most famous sweet wine is made mostly of Semillon. More excitingly to my mind, the white wines of Grave and Pessac-Léognan, also in Bordeaux, are absolutely outstanding, and they are on the rise. These wines are dry white wines that are blended from Semillon and Sauvignon Blanc, and they are becoming more and more popular. Even in South Africa, where we have less than 1,000 hectares of Semillon, all the Semillon that does make it into bottle is really, really very good. And if you want to know just how good it is, I'm going to give you 7 examples, moving from the east across South African winelands. So we'll start all the way down in Elim. You have to track down the Ghost Corner Semillon from Elim. Then moving along next door in Sondagkloof, there's Trezane Barnard's Reserve Semillon. Moving over still into Walker Bay, you've got Benguela Cove, who make a really crazy Semillon. And then going up the mountain into Elgin, in that little bowl on top of the hill, you have Shannon Vineyards, who produce the Triangle Semillon. And then in Franschhoek, there are 2 Semillons, one made by Bukkenhoutskloof and another made by Damascene. And finally, getting into Stellenbosch in the Helderberg, there is Vergelegen's Reserve Semillon, which is again well worth hunting down. Now, the relevance of all this is that today's hand drink solo wine of the day is almost 50% South African Semillon. It is the Highlands Road Sine Cera 2017 white blend, and it's made from Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon. And it's interesting to know that 2017 was also the very first vintage that Highlands Road bottled their first 100% Semillon. The wine is made by Vanessa Simkis, and she is a lady who has earned Highlands Road more than its fair share of trophy awards and platter 5-star ratings. Highlands Road is an estate in Elgin located on Highlands Road. But the name refers to more than just its address. It is also a tip of the cap to the owner, Michael White's Scottish heritage. And he assures me that Highlands Road Wine Estate is the only wine estate in the entire world that has its own tartan registered with the Scottish Tartan Authority. The farm was bought back in 2004 by the current owner, Michael White, who is a commercial and property attorney. When he bought the farm, it was a run-down old apple estate, but his plan had always been to turn it into an active wine farm. In fact, he describes his decision to buy the farm as a wine hobby that got out of hand. And I've got to tell you, this is probably one of the few examples where a flight of fancy or poor impulse control actually ended up making the world a better place. But Michael is no fool. When he bought this land back in 2004, he was very, very aware of the viticultural potential of Elgin. And so when you look back now, his decision to buy the land all those years ago seems almost prescient in light of all the acclaim that Elgin is getting as an appellation on the global stage. For those of you who are familiar with Highlands Road as an estate and perhaps want to know where they're headed, Michael was willing to tell us that they are planning to release a Chenin Blanc in the next couple of years. And then he said more imminently, but also more mysteriously, there is a very exciting red blend on the way with strong heritage connotations. And if you're asking, is he talking about Pinotage? And if he is he talking about Pinotage in a cool climate like Elgin? And if you are asking that, well, then it's worth noting that many of South Africa's more progressive winemakers and more progressive viticulturalists are starting to think of Pinotage as a cool climate grape, just like its parents, Pinot Noir and Cinsault. And if you're wanting to know what that tastes like in a bottle, then perhaps track down some wines like the Spionkop Pinotage from Elgin, or perhaps the Pinotages from Walker Bay of Ashbourne and also Southern Rite. The Highlands Road Sine Cera white blend, as we know it, was originally called the Sincere white blend. But it was unfortunately then discovered that the term Sincere had been trademarked by another wine producer, even though they weren't using the name Sincere in South Africa. So Michael had to go back to the drawing board, but the word sincere was still on the drawing board. So he looked closer at it, and he discovered that our English word sincere in fact comes from two Latin words, Sine Cera, which means without wax. Now, if you look at the English concept of sincerity and the Latin two words which mean without wax, you would think that it was quite obvious that what was trying to be expressed was something along the lines of authenticity, clear, earnest, honest communication, no patina, perhaps a presentation of wine without the unnecessary embellishment of oak. Now, this would be entirely logical, but you'd also be embarrassingly mistaken, because this is not what it means at all. In fact, to really make sense of this name, you need one more little bit of intel. The term Sine Cera was apparently originally used in the context of stone sculptures. So, should an artist working on a sculpture make a mistake or a misstep and cause a crack or fissure in the marble, they would then take a mixture of marble dust and wax and fill in that crack. Now, in the context of that, a statue that was produced Sine Cera would obviously be worth far more because it was a statue without misstep, without mistake, a flawless work of art. And so it's into that context that Michael decided to name his wine Sine Cera. Now, one might consider it a little grandiose to call your wine a flawless work of art, but let's get into the glass to see if there's anything to it. And when you give it a sniff, well, I mean, that is why we drink older white wine. So this is already 6 years old, so it's had a little bit of time to develop tertiary notes, notes that can only develop with time in the bottle. And this has some really interesting kind of smoky flint element, but also a little bit of lanolin, yes, like sheep's wool. But you also get the fresher, more vibrant stuff that you get in a young wine. This particular wine is a mix of Sauvignon Blanc and also Semillon, and it's got a little bit of both in there. There is the lemongrass that you get from Semillon. There's also a little bit of lime leaf and even some herbal tea. And there's the fruitier stuff like riper citrus, oranges, and a little bit of Meyer lemon, perhaps. Finally, there is a subtle touch of butter toffee, and that's because this wine did spend a little bit of time in second fill oak. And when we give it a sip, wow, that acid is absolutely spectacular. And it's not just up front either. It pushes right through into the finish. You are definitely not going to mistake this for a poolside quaffer. The fruit is incredibly concentrated on the palate and it makes such an impression. But that's not all. There's texture too, because you have this kind of grapefruit pith / Meyer lemon thing which dries out the mouth a little bit, but then you also have that zingy, elegant acidity that cuts through it all and leaves your mouth watering and watering for more towards the end. And so, as you can imagine, the combination of these two experiences going on in your mouth at the same time is a fascinating drinking experience. Okay, so that's all we have time for today. But if you have any questions about Highlands Road or Sauvignon Semillon blends, then leave a comment and I will try and get back to you as soon as possible. If you enjoyed the video, then support us on Patreon and sign up to our Hand Drink Solo YouTube channel, where we publish at least 6 videos each month talking about things like wine science, wine history, unusual cultivars, and some of the rising winemaking stars coming out of the dynamic South African winelands.